She said, Scott, there's somebody from the Division of Securities here to see you. That was the beginning of the end. What catches me the most is the look on my mom's face. As a parent now, to know that your kid might have to go through that was not easy. All right. Well, I guess we're filming. It's official.
We are rolling.
Welcome to the Real Estate Money Matrix Podcast, Episode 1. And we're filming, so I'm probably going to look back and forth. Is that okay?
That's
Andrew,
perfect.
the director behind the camera? Okay. So I'm Scott Ulmer. Guys, it's great to have you with us here. We are starting this new podcast and really excited for a lot of reasons. We want to make it entertaining. We think we are entertaining. You may be making fun of us, not with us. That's okay.
They're definitely going to make some fun of us.
Yeah, we're pretty easy targets, but we think we've got some insights to share, certainly from an education standpoint regarding real estate, and a lot of things we want to share over the next several podcasts and beyond. We're going to have some great guests, and certainly hope that you enjoy exactly what you're listening. With me on my right is my right-hand man, Danny Mazie. Danny, say hello.
Yes, how we doing? It's awesome to finally be at the table delivering episode number 1.
How long have we been talking about this for?
3 years almost.
Been a while.
It's been a long time in the making, but finally we got some helping hands in the background here, and it's awesome to get to episode number 1. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. And so we have a special episode. In fact, we were talking before the recording here what we wanted to call it, and we landed on a name. Did it come easy, Danny? Was it an easy decision?
No, it was a tough coin flip. Actually, it was maybe one sleepless night thinking about what we were going to name it, but I'm excited.
Well, what did we name the first episode and why? I'll let you kind of set it up, and then let's roll, man.
Yeah, so Scott loves real estate so much that he went to prison for it. Dum 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 dum.
I did. Yeah. Where's the old background
we need to cue
music?
Mike up with the bum 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 bum. I got you in post. Yeah. No, it's just, I mean, man, your story, it touches so many people. I've seen it break down the walls for people. I've seen everybody has been in a spot of adversity, and they hear a story to pull them out of it, something to shoot for, right? America loves when somebody falls down, but they love even more when they climb back up. And your story is exactly that. It's a great time for it. A lot of people are going through a lot of crazy adversities. This market's going to do nothing but deal out a lot more of that. I think it's a timely, everything happens for a reason, right? I think it's a timely first episode. Your story connects with people, and I'm excited for you to tell it to the world. It's going to be awesome.
Thank you. And, I would say I'm excited to a degree as well. Now, I for those listening, and of course, some may know who we are, some may not, but we have a real estate investment firm based in Jacksonville, Florida. We also have affiliates, which are similar to franchisees around the country. And so when we have trainings, this is incorporated as part of our training. And what we learned a long time ago is it's important for our people to know who we are on a personal level, but also as I started sharing my story more and more, we found that it connected with a lot of people. Just like you said, man, it's a lot of life is hard. In fact, I was sharing this with my kids the other day. Life is hard no matter how you slice and dice it. When you make a lot of money, it makes it a little more enjoyable. It doesn't take away the sting, but it really is about learning to dance in the rain. That's kind of my biggest takeaway, and kind of becoming some of my best advice to people is that life is never going to be perfect. It's never going to be all rainbows and butterflies. It seems cliche, but how you handle those times and how you dance in the rain, as the quote goes, is really, really paramount. So, well, let me dive in to the story and kind of the essence of the topic, which was I love real estate so much that I went to prison for it. Full disclosure, the story is still not the easiest for me to tell. If I'm being totally honest, which I try to be all the time.
Yes.
So when I'm talking, I don't say I'm being honest. Doesn't mean I'm lying to you. I'm always trying to be honest. But no, it's a story that happened about 16 years ago. Time flies when you're having fun, I guess.
We're not trying to point out any ages.
No
There's
ageism
here. No
not,
ageism.
Not dating ourselves,
No.
but no, I think that as time has passed, and I've told it more and more, especially at our trainings, I feel more comfortable with it, but I think I see the potential for people listening to maybe connect with it as well. And so so let me hop in and just kind of start from the top, if I may. And I would ask you to interject with points of clarity. And
definitely.
If there's something that you've heard it before, so if something sticks out you want me to convey, please make sure that you interrupt me. You know me, once I start going, man, it's like do.
No, I'll cut you off real quick.
So, first I will say my name's Scott Ulmer. I am in Jacksonville, Florida. As I mentioned, that's where our corporate office is. And Been down here over 10 years and spent most of my life in Ohio. Go Bucks! Did I say that out?
We didn't say go Jags. Though.
Well, we didn't say
Why
go.
was that?
Well,
Go Jags.
yeah. I was just saying, we got Andy behind the
hashtag
camera.
not a Jaguars podcast.
We do know someone that has a Jaguars
We
podcast, don't we? So we are. I did tell people about 3 years ago when the Jags went to the playoffs. In fact, I think they got to the AFC Championship or NFC Championship, and I hurt my neck that year when I fell off the bandwagon.
You fell right off the back of that bandwagon.
I was a diehard fan that year, man. I've been diehard fan since that was the only time actually. So, but I might be a diehard fan soon. We got Trevor Lawrence and Tebow.
I like that it's we.
It was we.
Yeah.
It was we. I mean, I live here. Doesn't that make me a fan? So, but I spent most of my life in Ohio, as I was saying, and so definitely a diehard Buckeyes fan. Anybody out there, if you're from Michigan, you can just turn it off now. We don't even want you listening.
Yeah, tune out. You should probably just tune out. Yep.
So, but let me go ahead and share. So again, I share this at our trainings, and I am very open about it for a lot of reasons. But I've had the privilege of being a lifelong real estate guy. In fact, I'll start from the very top. My mom and dad were both dirt poor. Both of them had poor upbringings. My mother's father, my grandfather, died when she was 9, and my father never really knew his father, and so both were kind of the classic wrong side of the tracks. Got married. Both were teaching high school. My dad was a phys ed teacher and football coach. Very fitting for him.
Very fitting for him. Yes.
His head and the football about the same size. But
Yes.
my mom was a science teacher, but it was evident early on that my dad wanted to provide a better life for his kids. I have a younger brother, 4 years my junior. So back in the day, this would have been probably 80, 81.
When you had to walk uphill to school both
That's
ways.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
Dad was so poor. Not only did he have to walk to school in 10 feet of snow, he didn't have holes in his shoes. He didn't even have shoes. That's how poor he was. So I've only heard that story 25,000 times now. He was very poor, and in fact, I'm very proud of his story. He was truly a rags to riches, and I always like to kind of boast about that. But when I was born, I had a younger brother. Parents used to eat popcorn so we could have baby food, as they used to tell us. And so at one point, he realized he wanted a better life for his kids. And back in the day, there used to be this thing called newspapers, and you've heard newspapers, kind of like phone books.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, they had an ad for a guy. There was a book, and it was How to Wake the Financial Genius Inside of You. For those folks that are seasoned, won't call them older, but seasoned. It's a book by Mark Harrelson. It was very popular back in the day and changed a lot of people's lives, my dad included. Well, as the story goes, you could send in a check for $10, and they wouldn't cash it for 30 days. If you didn't like the book, you could return it, and they would return your check. So Dad knowingly wrote a bad check. Nobody tells on him here. And knowing he didn't have $10 in his account, sent the check in, got the book, read it cover to cover 3 times, sent it back before they cashed his check. Andrew didn't know that either.
Nope.
And from there, he learned effectively wholesaling, for lack of a better way to say it, maybe to simplify it, but a lot of other things. And from there, went out and did a deal and wholesaled it. It was around the corner from where he grew up, put under contract and assigned it and made like $4,300, something like that.
Can you imagine? At that moment, that time period too, $4,300 was all the money in the world, especially when you come from, barely rubbing 2 nickels together.
Sure. Well, and this is, I'm going to date myself, but almost 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Just scary to even say that. So $1,400 40 years ago is 3 times that,
Exactly.
probably $12,000 in that range. And so I get the chills when I tell this part of the story. My mom and dad went into the safe deposit box room and cashed it, and went in the safe deposit room and threw all the money up in the air and just kind of let it rain like the commercials. And that's a great story. I'm getting the chills telling it now. But yeah, for 2 people that grew up dirt poor to run into it, they'd never seen that much money, let alone had
in one place, right? And then for them to have it as theirs.
So but that was really the start of a shift in my life, which I didn't even know at the time, and certainly in my dad's. And he realized if I could do it one time, why can't I do it 2 and 3 and 4? So it was a great start for him and shifted the life of him, his sons, and I have 3 children now. Obviously working with you and the several others that work with us here. So it's impacted a lot of people along the way, and I could really go down that list with people he sold homes to, and I won't go further than that. But it was a life-changing moment for sure. So fast forward the tape, he was certainly a lightning rod and did very well. Became a big buyer and seller, and was a big investor. In fact, at one point was one of the biggest, I want to tell you, in the country, certainly the state. But so fast forward the tape. As I grew up, I had the privilege of getting dropped off in the middle of war zones with my younger brother, a couple pair of gloves and garbage bags, and go clean out that house. house and have some stories. Fire damaged houses, peeling up, a dead cat off of the floor, and I mean there was some pretty gnarly stuff we'd run across. But and how my mom was okay with my dad just dropping us off in those areas and coming back. Yeah, I mean, hey, how do you learn to fend for yourself, right? So
it was the '80s in Toledo.
That's right. That's right. So, but it was those were how you learn. Where you're kind of thrown into the the deep water and swim. I don't know if I would call cleaning out houses the deep water, but as a 14
it's a good place to be cutting your teeth as a kid.
It really is. And that you kind of learn along the way, and you learn the different facets and components of the business. So I actually, when I was 14, bought my first house, and not a great story. It's kind of a great story. I don't know, but
1010 King Street, baby.
That's right.
1010 King Street. The trap doesn't forget.
Yeah, the trap. That's right. It was actually funny. So and I'll segue from there, Danny. So when we first started speaking and really telling my story, I thought it would be kind of cool to go back to my first deal, 1010 King Street.
Oh, yeah.
And so this was about maybe 7-8 years ago. And so I went on Google Maps and went to pull up the location, and lo and behold, it was a dirt field. And
prime real
estate, man.
Prime real estate.
Well, what I haven't gotten to is I think I paid $1,500 for it. It was actually a tax lien back in the day, and had help with my dad's attorney and my dad's brother, my Uncle Ted. Everybody has an Uncle Ted, a UT as we call him. And so bought it and flipped it and made, I think, another $2,200 or some number. It was not a very special place. Well, fast forward the tape, and they tore it down, not because they were looking to build on that land. They tore it down because it was such a piece of crap. It probably wasn't worth standing. But the essence of the story is that I flipped out of my first deal, made some money, mowed lawns, saved up money, flipped that tax lien property to another investor, made a couple $1,000. I'm 14. I got hooked, man. The money, it was grabbing. It was addiction.
Shot in the arm. Yeah,
seriously.
Like
so
off and running.
Wanted to go do it again, and so played sports in high school, and certainly enjoyed that. And I ended up playing a little bit in college, but I really didn't want to go to college because I want to start making money. And I will say my parents were. They didn't let me drop out, which was good. I'm glad in hindsight.
Yeah.
They forced me to finish, and it's something I can say for life. But right after the first year, I said, listen, I want to be a doctor. I had a lot of school, a lot of debt, or I can go do real estate, which I love, and make a lot of money. And I liked making money, and those listening, that's not a bad thing. I love making money. You should love making money too.
That's right. That's right. That's the oxygen for life. It makes for a much better one.
Well, and recently put a manual and working on a book and a lot of other cool things behind the scenes. But there's I don't know if I showed it to you, but I've got this little ceramic. Literally, it's like ceramic, and it's from Mexico. Like, I don't know. There's probably a story behind it that I'm going to flower up, but it's very old. And but it's one side it's in Spanish, the other side is in English, and it says, "Being poor there's no disgrace in being poor.
I like
it's
that.
just very inconvenient."
I like that.
I like that too. Actually,
it is a little inconvenient.
Yeah, and I think that kind of dovetailing back into what we said at the beginning. Life is hard no matter how you slice it. When you have financial strains on top of that, it can make it to be really not enjoyable. And man, we're on this earth for a short time, and it's important to have joy and peace in your life. And when you have money concerns weighing over you all the time, it stinks.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like carrying big weights around. You don't want to do that all the time.
You don't want to do that. Yeah. And so you are going to have a challenging time on earth because that's life.
That's right.
When you can make some money, it makes it a little less inconvenient.
A little more enjoyable.
Yeah, a little more enjoyable. It's just a great quote. So I knew that making money was going to be a path that I wanted to pursue. So I fortunately didn't drop out. Parents required me to stay in. And so once I graduated school, started working for my dad. My first primary job, at this time, by the way, he had owned a lot of real estate, had bought and sold, and really had created a nice business for himself. Yeah. And I'd even call it a mini empire at the end of the day. Yeah, he
definitely had the empire there.
He was blowing and going. And so my first job was buying houses. That was my job, was the acquisitionist. And some of my funnest professional days, I must admit. Haven't said that in a long time, but
get the checkbook and go.
That's it. You didn't have to manage anybody. You didn't have to deal with a bunch of people. In many cases, we dealt with a lot of sellers, but we also bought a lot of bank-owned properties, and so a lot of times you didn't have to deal with sellers. In fact, it was funny. The other day, we have a little nanny from our church that helps out, and she said to me, "Scott, you're always going to have challenges in your business because you deal with people." I said, "Well, Miss Rita, that is spot on." So when
people are problems,
when you deal with people, yeah, you have, and I love people. Obviously, it's what we do. And so, but when you deal with other people, you always have their their nuances and things. So when I was buying a lot of bank-owned properties, I, in many cases, didn't have to deal with the seller, just with realtors or agents that I became close with. And so love that part of my job. Bought a ton of houses. In fact, we were doing about 150 deals a year. And Danny, you know a lot of this. So as I shared with you.
That's nothing. That's like a mind-boggling number for
well,
people.
thank you.
Those you break that down a little bit. That's a ton of volume to be doing in one. And you're in Toledo. It's not like you're in, Los Angeles doing 150 or Miami doing 100. You're in Toledo's a small town.
Toledo's not a big town.
A lot of doors in a year.
Yeah,
right there.
No, I would. You know what? And you and I have not mentioned that or talked about that before. But yeah, based on the target demographic of the city itself, small town's relative, but it's not like Podunk.
Right. No,
Nothingsville.
It's got more than 3 traffic lights.
It's got more than 3. It's got actually 5. So no, but there are I think 300,000 or 400,000 people. So it's a small town, but I would say small city, maybe more than town. But touche as far as the amount of deals. So we were buying, renovating, and selling 150 a year. So not buying and selling 150. I've seen people try to skew their numbers, make them look really good.
You get the count for one side of the transaction.
That's right. You make 3 offers and you get that, and then you get 3 offers made to you, and now you have 6 deals.
That's right.
Yeah. No, this is just these are we did 150 of those on a yearly basis, and we were blowing and going. In fact, we did that for many years running. And so as I was buying. I just had a field day. My biggest month, I bought 32 houses in a month. My biggest day was 6 houses in one day. Jack Amlin, the auctioneer, who's still a good buddy of mine today, was very instrumental in that one day where we got six deals. Yeah, that was a good day. That was on a Friday too. I remember that. So
did that day conclude with a drink on a Friday? I hope so. For 6
absolutely.
Houses in a day.
Yeah, that was a celebratory bottle of champagne.
Earned.
Yes. So, but buying was just a lot of fun, and so a lot of my come from today, a lot of the teaching and training I do is really how to buy. In fact, in real estate, those that know a little about real estate will know the statement, and those that don't, when you buy, you're really buying your profit when you make the purchase. And so, learning to negotiate with sellers, learning their motivations, why, what drives them, and really why they're selling, some of the nuances behind that, and then the motivation. And there's more. We'll certainly have a deep dive, and maybe multiple deep dives on these podcasts that talk about how to negotiate deals, the psychology of the seller. I took a seminar back in 2002, dating myself again, 19 years ago, but a guy named Barney Zick, who since has passed, and I just put this in the book actually, but just learned some tremendous things from him on how he approaches negotiations, and him, much like Jay Abraham, believes in preeminence, putting your client first. If you put their needs ahead of yours, regardless of the benefits to you, it's amazing what happens. It's a hard thing for people to wrap their heads around. They're out there trying to make a profit for themselves and do deals for them and their family, but by putting the client or the person you're trying to work with ahead of you, in spite of any gain for you, it's a hard concept for people to grasp.
Well, it's hard to think about that when everybody's so selfish, right? Everybody wants to know what's in it for them.
Right.
And if you're selling, negotiating, you have to know that that's what the other side of the table wants. They want to know what's in it for them. So you got to think with that in mind before you even get started.
That's it. And so few people do. Maybe
most people
fortunately
don't.
For us, I guess. Right? So, but that preeminence, it was a big deal when it comes to negotiating. So by being acquisitions for my father and really buying those 150 plus homes a year was a great kind of starting point. And so we would kind of basic MO for us, Danny. We would buy them, fix them up, and then we would sell them on what's called a land installment contract. Basically, we were the bank for the buyers. We would work with them to get them credit ready and mortgage qualified within about a 12, 18-month window, and they would get a bank loan, would refinance the loan with us. We'd roll that money over, do it again. We were averaging about $27,000 a deal, and we were doing about 13 of those a month as far as cash outs.
Yeah.
So we were doing buying and selling.
Out on the back
side. Exactly. Buying and selling the 150, and then as every month would surpass, the ones from a year ago would start cashing out. Of course, that more profit in, and then that frees up the cash to go do it again. So it was a really neat little model.
A machine.
It's a machine.
That's a
and
machine.
We teach some of that here, certainly the concepts and strategy behind it. We haven't trained anyone to replicate it exactly, although as we talk about behind closed doors, maybe off cameras, it's still, I believe, the best strategy out there in real estate.
Yeah. I mean, looking at everything that's out in the landscape, when you can buy them, get rid of the seller, have that small financing window and get cashed out on those things, the profit margin there is insane.
Well,
and
I want to stay on point because we're talking about prison here, and while I went to prison, I mean that's kind of a big deal.
We'll get there, we promise. We get there, we promise.
But no, that there is when you are acting in the capacity of a bank, whether you are lending the house in exchange for lending money, and or whether you have a contract to buy the house and you're kind of working within contracts, which is a lot of what we do at Pink, which is our company, Little Pink Houses of America. At the end of the day, when you are working with a buyer in this capacity, you really have 5 different paydays along the process, not to mention, and this is the one thing to this day, 25 years of doing this full time, I still have never seen a flipper on any of those HGTV shows or podcasts or anything that ever talk about the difference in a short-term versus long-term capital gain.
It's a killer.
So it's a killer. It's
Crushes your profit.
20% off of your bottom line for a short-term capital gain. Now, it's really, that's what you're going to be saving if you can convert to a long-term capital gain. So you're talking hard numbers. You make a, $20,000 profit, whatever the case might be, $40,000 profit, you need to carve out about 40% for short-term capital gain. So there's a couple of very basic tricks or nuances, we'll call them, that can take your short and convert to long and literally add 20% to your bottom line. Another story, another day, but part of being the bank and acting in the capacity of working with buyers who you're trying to create homeowners, which is our mantra down here, you have multiple opportunities for payday. So it's a great strategy. It's a great company. There were reasons, and I'm going to get to obviously the meat and potatoes of the podcast here in just a second, but reasons that things didn't work out at the company.
Yeah.
I would say the irony of it, and maybe a missing fact or an overlooked fact, is that what happened to the company, my dad's company, had nothing to do with the real estate.
Right.
Had to do with how he was borrowing the money. And so I've shared that with many people over the years, that the strategy, the systems, the company, the model was phenomenal. But when you execute any model the wrong way, it's not going to probably go so well. So
some small costly mistakes.
Yeah, small costly mistakes that added up to some big paydays,
Seriously.
right? In the wrong way. So
I got a quick question on the terms, the capital gains and all. Did your dad see that at the outset and build the process that way, or did he just realize that there's this amazing pool of buyers over here that can't quite get there yet? If I can have this short-term lease purchase wrapped around these deals, I can do a lot more deals.
Yeah.
And that was an ancillary benefit, or was that something that was thought about kind of in the beginning?
I'd like to give my dad all the credit in the world and tell you that he thought through that, but I think the reality is he realized early on that there was a niche of buyers that always existed. Yeah. Every market around the country, good market, bad market, easy credit, hard credit, seller's market, buyer's market, there's always a segment of people that can't walk into a bank and qualify.
Exactly.
He recognized that early on. I will tell you the reason that I don't think the capital gain played a big factor in that is that there were many times that if we had the right buyer, we'd flip out of the house. So there would be, so there are still classic flips, and I'm not knocking flips at all.
Sure.
It's, in fact, they're phenomenal.
Especially
if you
do
them right. Yeah. So, but most people just don't really think through the fact that they have a significant capital gain that if they just changed a couple things, they might be able to save and really earn a lot more money. So
that damn tax man, he's always got his hand in your back
tell
pocket.
you what, Uncle Sam. So so Dad did recognize that as time went, and then I think that became part of the model as a whole. But so started buying, and at a certain point, my father had a non-family member who was the president of the company, who to this day is a close friend of mine, as you know, Danny,
Sure.
and is still and works with us in some capacities today, which is really, really kind of neat because he's a tremendously bright guy. And so, but he was in charge of running the business. He was the president. He also was in charge of raising money. And by the way, what would happen? Very simple. My father would borrow money from a private investor. And at the time, now this was many, many years ago, he was advertising on the radio. And by the way, another story another day, but the rules of engagement back then for lenders were much different than they are today once the Dodd-Frank had passed several years back, or I guess maybe 6 or 7 years ago at this point. So my father was definitely playing outside the lines at that time. You couldn't just advertise on radio for investors at that point, at least and fly under the radar.
A little cavalier.
Well, that was a word that was used to describe him, as you know. So, but he was advertising on Rush Limbaugh. I remember vividly, and I remember it was 15% and guaranteed, and collateralized and secured by a mortgage, and real estate, and kind of a local boy, done good, and had a lot of interest. In fact, a lot of interest. And so, and again, great investment and great investment strategy. There were just execution errors that were significant that caused the company to ultimately go out of business. But that was the MO. So a private investor who was generating at that point maybe 3% in the bank. Today it's like a half a point in the bank.
Right.
And they would say, geez, I can get 15% over here. And so they were.
That's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer. Well, they were beating the door down. So they would lend money. My father would borrow money to buy it, borrow money to rehab it. We'd fix it up. We would sell it to a buyer who typically needed a window of time, 12 to 24 months to get their traditional financing. In Ohio, we used a mechanism called a land installment contract. They're similar variations in every state. They're usually called something different. They usually do the same thing. And there are variations of those. I will not talk about those in this podcast, but one of the
for the lawyers.
Well, it's for the lawyers, or it's and I guess me. I kind of think I'm a lawyer, but I'm not just saying. So
he now plays one on the internet.
That's right. So I tell you, if there's any other contract geeks out there like me, I don't know. Maybe
you're top of the board. And I don't know that I've ever met or been around anybody, for one, with a mind of brilliance for real estate. For two, who maybe needs another hobby because he loves real estate contracts.
Who literally would admit that they liked real estate contracts? I mean, what kind of person is that? I guess that's
hopping
me.
Saturday nights.
Listen, the excitement of my life, reviewing deals on a Friday night and looking at contracts. So I'm laughing, but there's truth to that. No, I'm just kidding. So
that's a painful laugh.
That's it. So it's a cry. I'm really crying inside. So Dad would have this motto of borrowing the money, and when he did borrow it, by the way, he would give the investor a first mortgage, and they were acting just like a bank. And so when it was done right, it really was a great strategy. Our buyer is in the home. They are working with a bank really from the first day they move in. So over the next 12, 24 months to get a traditional mortgage, we would work in conjunction with the lender and all of our buyers. The interim period, the lender, the private lender, a private investor that lent my dad the money was getting monthly payments from my dad. So we collect a payment from our buyer. He'd send a payment to the lender, the private lender, at which point, through the term of the deal, once our buyer got their loan from a institutional bank, a Wells Fargo or Bank of America, then we would use that money, pay the investor off, and almost always the investor wanted to reinvest it. And there are some technicalities there, because once you pay the investor off, if they give you the money right back that same day, because they don't want you to stop paying them interest, and you take that money, you've just broken the law. Most people don't really know that.
That's the no-no.
That's a big no-no. Yeah. What you're doing is saying, as a investor, a real estate investor, I'm looking for a private investor, and if you give me money as a real estate investor, I'm going to give you a mortgage on the property. So my promise to you for your security is a first mortgage. If you give me a check and I don't give you a mortgage, I just took money, what's called unsecured. So right off the bat, I just either lied or misrepresented, or both, or all of the above. I don't know.
D for all of the above.
But at the end of the day, and I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself, but that was a very technical aspect, but it's maybe not technical. It's not how you're supposed to do it. So today, the right way to do it, and really back then, was the private investor would wire the funds to the title company. The title company would then use those funds to buy it, and then you would get the rehab money at that time, but it was all done a certain way. You were giving a mortgage at the time you took the money. That's probably the bottom line.
Right.
So,
but once that mailbox money stops,
the
investor hates that. They get so used to just having that drip coming in there.
Well, and then let me explain that, because that's exactly right. So we would do simple interest, so it was not compounding, and it was on a monthly basis. So, if it was a $10,000 investment, of which we don't take those, and let's just say simple math, it was $100 a month, we would send you $100 every month. And if it was 24 months, great. If it was 36 months, great. You'd still get all your $10,000 back at the end of the term.
Yeah, by the way, you can't go deposit $10,000 into your bank and get $100 back every month.
Every month, right?
It's never going to happen.
Exactly. And then go get your 10 out when you're done.
That's why it's so attractive.
So then we have a house that this private lender lent money on. When the house that we had, that buyer that was living there, they went and got their own mortgage and paid us off, at which time we paid the lender off. Their monthly payments stopped coming, which is what you just said. Their monthly interest.
Shut the spigot off.
That's it. And they love that. And I mean, who wouldn't love that, right?
I love
that. Everybody likes getting mailbox
Two
money.
thumbs, this guy.
That's right.
Everybody loves that.
So when the house cashed out and those payments stopped, it definitely was something the investors didn't want. They wanted the interest to keep coming. So once they got paid off, they were vying to get that money back into my dad's hands, so we could buy more real estate, and ultimately they could continue to get their interest checks.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So, but again, that good old boy, that relationship, which is how they wanted it, how he wanted it, doesn't make it above board when it comes to the eyes of the law.
Yeah.
And no smiling. I mean, that's just that's the truth. So, fast forward the tape. So things are blowing and going, and now we're talking about the early 2000s now, and you could trip over yourself, literally trip over yourself, even in a town like Toledo, and still walk away with $40,000 bucks.
Bunch of money.
So a lot of the gurus out there
We're birthed in that time frame.
Yeah,
right?
they really were. In fact, we talk a lot about some of the gurus. I even kind of had a slant. The gurus kind of said it funny, but I have some pedigree, I guess, if you will, because Ron LeGrand, who's still a mentor to me, ran his real estate, as you know, for a few years, and he helped me from the lowest spot of my life. And I'll memorialize it one more time. I'm forever grateful for the guy. He helped me from the bottom of my life and gave me an opportunity that changed my life. So, Ron, you're probably not listening, but if you are, man, I'm forever grateful. I really am. That comes from the heart. So he gave me a shot, and so but Ron was really big in the early 2000s. I didn't know who he was, but a lot of these gurus were, because they were realizing you can get into real estate investing, trip over yourself, make every mistake in the book, and still walk away with 40 grand.
Exactly.
Now it's not that way as much, and certainly it's saturated with a lot of gurus. You do a deal, you're a guru, right? You can start teaching people on the internet. Right? Everything that's on the internet, it's believable, right?
It's just that easy.
It's all right.
It's just that easy.
Well, I read it online, so it must be true. So it's that's a whole other story another day. So, but
episode 2 coming your way now.
So we were blowing and going, and obviously no clue that 2008 was ahead of us, and we thought, like most people right now, as we record this, and I don't know that it's not going to be dated just by virtue of it's the first podcast, but everybody thinks that value is just going to keep appreciating.
Keep going up and up and up.
Just going to continue to be this way. And if you want to buy a house, you better, saddle up, because you're in for a ride.
I mean, Zillow says so.
Yeah,
so
of course.
Why would you not believe it?
Well, it's online again, right? But it is. I will tell you, in a moment of seriousness, I vividly remember the psychology of people. You think it's just going to continue.
Yeah.
And I would even confess in some of my off moments today, I think unconsciously or subconsciously, you just assume that's the way it's going to be. Well, I'm here to tell you, it's not. It's not sustainable. I don't know anybody disagrees or argues with that. But the question becomes when things are going to change, but they will change. There's no doubt about that. So, but early 2000s, blowing and going. My father, I'm 24 at the time, ultimately was 25 when my dad said, named me president of the company. So I was honored and flattered, excited, all of those things. Was I qualified? Oh, it's
Fully
another question.
Ready?
25, all that experience I had. Buying houses to run a big company, not quite.
That's the young prince on the fast track to kingdom, right there.
You go.
That's a high speed move, right?
That was a high speed move, and of course, as I say, I'd like to think I was not the dullest knife in the drawer. I don't think I would ever say I was the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I think I was about an average guy, and I did the best I could, and learned a ton, and candidly and maybe frankly, very proud of some of the accomplishments we had. And I won't go into any of those on this. We don't have time, and I'd have to explain them. But we made some great headway ultimately in the relatively short time that we had. But fast forward the tape. So now we have, I think, 273 investors. We I think had 650 properties. We had about 12 commercial buildings. We were doing 150 deals a year, making pretty good profits on each one, and really had a machine going. And unfortunately, things started to come unglued. What most people don't realize, in the market crash of 2008, the technical bottom was September of 08. It didn't happen overnight.
Right.
So,
it wasn't like day one we're good, day two
was
destruction.
Right. Okay. So all of a sudden, here's the, although if you compare it to the market crash of 29, of which I was just watching something ironically last night, that really did happen overnight.
Right.
I mean, there was no
like
all of a sudden people were living high and mighty, and then they literally were broke the next day. And
and then they weren't.
everything is great.
Till it is.
Till it's not. So, but that is becoming quickly one of my new favorite quotes, by the way. But so, but seriously though, comparison wise, in 29 it was instant. In 08 it was a few years in the making.
Yeah.
So, where I'm from, Ohio, we started feeling it.
That's one of the earliest indicators. Was Ohio.
Ohio was we started seeing it. We actually were doing some deals in Vegas at the time, and we made money on 2. We broke even on 1. Never broke even on a deal in my life, so that was kind of telling.
Yeah.
So, but we were able to get out of that in time, and Vegas crashed shortly thereafter. So there were things that were forthcoming, and so. But here's the interesting part, And so, take a little break. No, I'm just kidding. So this is where it gets steamy.
This is where
here.
the plot gets thick.
So, all right. So this
2 C's.
This really is interesting, and I don't think it's. I read something the other day that if you didn't actually happen, you wouldn't even believe, right?
Right.
It's not that drastic, but
Sure.
there are some parts that you say, like, did that really happen? Like, that really happened? Wow. Yeah. So the state of Ohio, back in the early 2000s, had a surplus in the Workman's Comp Fund. So every employer around the country pays into Workman's Comp, and that's used what it's for. Well, they had such a surplus, the state of Ohio, that they decided they had the bright idea to lend the money out to the private sector. So far, it still could make some sense, and I think it was if you in the private sector were able to generate a 6% return, anything above 6% you would keep. So it was a partnership of some sort. Maybe you split above 6%. I don't remember. Right. I wasn't a borrower there. I just remember obviously hearing a lot about it. So at the time, there was a gentleman who, his name isn't private. I don't know. Maybe I think out of respect, I'll probably leave it off just because.
Go with first names only.
Yeah, we'll go with Tom.
Yeah,
how's that? Tom and Jerry, right? So no, but Tom was a big political power broker. Those guys really exist.
House of Cards in real life.
Yeah, as I say, it's not just movies, right? So in fact, I think that the older I get, the more I realize those are the people that really behind the scenes have a lot to do with things and how they're running in the government. But this guy Tom was one of those, and very well connected. And in fact, I'll never forget. Went to see. This is when George W. Bush was president, and he came to speak, and I was with Tom, and I'll never forget George Bush and Laura Bush kind of point over to us. Oh, look, honey, there's Tom. Well, that's when I knew the guy was connected, right?
Rubbing elbows with the right people.
With the president. So, in fact, he was very good friends with Taft, who was the governor of Ohio at the time. Taft's grandfather was the president in the early 1900s. Gotcha. So, because I was such a student of history, I know these things, right? Totally just made that up, by the way.
A-.
So, listen, you sit next to the smart girls, right? Not just because, not that I'm looking over their shoulders or anything, but hey.
Guilty.
So Tom, who's very well connected, finds out about this opportunity where you could borrow money from the Workman's Comp Bureau. So Toledo is about 2.5 hours from Columbus. Columbus is the state capital of Ohio. And you had to go to Columbus to apply for the fund to borrow this money. Workman's Comp going to lend it to you. If you can get them a 6% return, anything above 6 that you got to keep. And again, if I'm inaccurate on that, it's very minimally inaccurate. Yeah. So, but I'm recalling this from 15 plus years ago. So anyway, so Tom drives down to Columbus from Toledo. It's about 2.5 hours there, fills out the paperwork. He's on the way back. He happened to bank at a small bank up in North. That is very common. You have literally individual banks with one location.
Just town banks.
The local town bank. And so when they get a big wire, it usually perks up their regulators and underwriters and those that are kind of watching the accounts. And so they called Tom and said, Tom, we just want you to know $25 million just hit your account.
I mean, it sounds as crazy and shady as could be.
This, by the way, was told to me by Tom. So I'm not getting this from a newspaper article or from secondhand. This is right from Tom. If he was embellishing,
from the horse's mouth.
If he was embellishing, he was embellishing to me. But I didn't catch that. So bizarre as it sounds, literally he had $25 million wired to him in that same day. But so
sign me up for that.
I tell you what, what's even crazier is 6 months later he went down. You could apply for another. He borrowed another 25. So this guy had borrowed $50 million of state money. Now this isn't Brazil or some other country that may have state money loans. That this is America. That when the state is loaning you $50 million, I mean it's just that it's still
that's bonkers.
Well, I still have a tough time putting that together.
It's hard to wrap your mind around that.
It's hard to wrap your mind around that. There's no question about that. So.
Amazing.
Unfortunately, what ended up happening in the interim, a couple things. So Tom has $50 million. So now it's his responsibility. He has to pay 6% interest on it, which means he needs to invest it and generate that return for the state. And then he kept whatever above that. Well, he took about $2 million of that and invested with my father. And we bought some stuff. And obviously, a good deal maker never has cash sitting around, right? You always put it on the street. So when we caught wind of it, because all of a sudden, know he was on the front page of the newspaper, and so.
And I'm sure you're not really asking where the money's coming from when it's a guy of that stature who's just,
That's exactly
working
right.
with your dad. It's not like
that's exactly,
doing a lot of fact finding.
No,
when
that's
that check comes through.
That's it. Yeah, you usually don't want to qualify. So
yeah, I'm not questioning
$2
million to go buy houses. I'm just going to buy the houses.
That's exactly right. well, let me rewind the tape because what this is, and again, this is stuff that really happened. But there was a Tom was the head of the Republican Party for the state of Ohio.
Yeah.
The head of the Democratic Party of the state of Ohio at the same time was a gentleman who owned a newspaper locally. Mm-hmm. And when the Republicans won, when Bush won and the Democrats lost, evidently there were some exchanges made by Tom and the Democratic Party chair. Tom was the Republican Party chair. The Democratic Party chair owned a newspaper. They had some words, and after that, the Democratic Party chair who owned the newspaper said, well, we'll just put a private investigator on you and look in your underwear. Well, I don't care who you are. I've said this many times. You can be IBM, of which they were found of some improprieties accounting-wise. Arthur Anderson, which is no longer in business. What are they, Accenture now?
Yeah.
And were several others. It doesn't matter who you are. There is a thing called GAAP in accounting, generally accepted accounting principles. And in GAAP, that gives you the latitude, if you will, to make a decision based on your interpretation of the accounting rules. So I'm going off on a tangent on accounting rules, of which I know little about, but I know that when people make decisions, if you really look in someone's underwear, I don't care if you're IBM, Arthur Anderson, Apple, Microsoft, if you really looked in their accounting underwear, so to speak, you're going to probably find some things that could be questionable. Write-offs or, just the way that they account. I'll leave it there.
Sure. And once they want you?
Once they want you, yeah. Thank you.
It's game
just
over.
Boil it down, right?
Once they want you, you're done.
What's kind of crazy, and I mentioned Brazil a minute ago, when I first got down to Jacksonville and I was working for Around the Grand, there were a couple of guys from either Brazil or some Latin American country, and I told my story one of the first times from stage, and they came up to me afterwards, and they were commenting, like, we think places like Colombia and Brazil and Argentina, where are these guys from? We think those are like kind of, at least if we're admitting it, maybe have more corruption and more, right. I mean, I'd be more scared in a country like that than America, right?
Of course.
They said, man, we look at America like you look at our country. Like it's like, look at this stuff. If they want you, they're going to get you.
They're going to come get you.
So maybe it doesn't matter what country you're in, America
if the man wants you,
yeah, maybe
you're
America's
toasted.
no different. America, excuse me. So some of my throat there. But, so anyway, so they started this newspaper guy started having a reporter really look into Tom's affairs, and unfortunately, what they found was this $50 million that he had borrowed was some of it was being used on a personal level. Well, that wasn't the agreement, and ultimately that became a big blow up. So, couple of things at that time. So he invested $2 million in our company. We had already bought real estate, so that money was already on the streets. So you can't just go get that back.
Right.
But they started covering this guy, and they literally was on the front page of the newspaper every day for 6 months. Kid you not, there was a newspaper article on the front page of the newspaper talking about how he had been on the front page of the paper the past 6 months. I'm not kidding.
That's how you know it's bad.
They ran out of stuff to talk about. So let's just talk about how many times we put him on the cover of the newspaper.
That's how you know it's bad.
Yeah, you know this. So look, we scraped and scrounged and begged, borrowed, stole. I don't think we stole. Didn't rob any banks, but we choked up the $2 million, and that was not easy. That's a lot of money.
You need to get yourself away from this guy.
We said, yeah. So we refied, pulled, borrowed, did what we needed to do to get those properties and get him. And so we paid him all back, thinking maybe we dodged a bullet. Unfortunately, in the end, he went down because of the fact that he had commingled funds and fought it. And again, there was a lot of political behind it because he was a political power broker. But ultimately, the businesses that he lent money in, every one of them were investigated. Every one of them, at least in Toledo, went out of business, which is really kind of a shame, for lack of a better way to say it.
Yeah, I mean, that guy became cancer.
He really did. And it killed multiple businesses. So now, well, I'll get to there because there were things that we didn't do right at the end of the day. And I want to be real clear
I'm sure there's
about
things that all those businesses didn't do right. But when somebody comes with that kind of money,
it's the same thing.
It's hard to say no to that when you're running a business.
That's exactly right. Well, plus you're none the wiser of any
You don't know the
improprieties.
backstory of it. You don't know the
You wouldn't think
rules
twice.
on his
and
side.
you said it 5 minutes ago, the stature of the guy coming to the table was
That's a big
top-notch.
part of it.
Yeah, it's huge.
It's not some nobody who you ran through the alley and said, "Hey, I got some money."
That's
for you.
it. Yeah, you didn't. He didn't show up with a suitcase
No.
full of hundreds, right?
No.
It was done the right way. Now, if it was a suitcase full of hundreds, we probably to figure out how to use that money. But, so
we'll account for this the right way. We promise.
So unfortunately, I'm going to say this because it's on my mind. Tom borrowed $50 million. Tom ended up went to a trial, was found guilty, and was sentenced to 18 years in prison. He did, I think, 12, which is a shame because murderers don't get that much in some cases. But when the state of Ohio came in and they basically took over everything he was doing, and they liquidated everything, the state recovered $62 million. So
they made money at the end of the day.
They made $12 million, and it was in a matter of like 2 or 3 years. It was crazy, and a shame. And
he ate the bullet on that.
Yeah, took the bullet. 12. Yeah, it was really a shame. And so, unfortunately, but it's amazing, like this behind the scenes political stuff. And so had Bush not won, or had there been some other, I mean, all these things, of course, what if and woulda, coulda, shoulda. Wow. But at the end of the day, that ultimately caused the spotlight to come on my dad's company. Well, let me rewind the tape. There's something very important happened in 1999. I'm still in college at that time, dating myself once again, and
looking good.
Not nearly as good as I look today.
College stud.
Stud.
Let's call it what it is.
See, it's all audio here, so you can't see my face and how pretty. Oh wait, we're recording. Oh no, they can't. Okay, so they caught me in a lie. You caught me lying. Yeah. Not as handsome as I used to be.
Not the pretty face of the company.
That is my nickname, the pretty face. So, but back in 1999, as my father was really kind of getting a lot of traction with his investments. So remember, he was advertising on the radio. Rush Limbaugh, guaranteed fixed 15%, secured by a mortgage, local boy, da-da-da-da. I'm not sure he said local boy in the ad, but it was certainly... Rush might have.
R.I.P.
Yeah.
R.I.P.
That's right, R.I.P. Yes. So, but again, very, very brash marketing. But so at the time, as the story goes, there was an investor that pulled $300,000 from the stockbroker. And invested with my father.
That's a big chunk.
It's a big chunk. And
for
again,
a stockbroker to lose, that's a big one.
It really is. And it's funny. You watch shows on the History Channel, and they say, and it costs X amount of money, and in today's money, it would be, Y, whatever that is. But you think that that's only on the History Channel from 100 years ago, but really, 15, 20 years ago, $300,000. It was a lot of money, still a lot of money today, but it's even a lot more money today. Yeah. So stockbroker said, well, who the heck is this John Ulmer guy? And he calls the Division of Securities, which is the state level SEC. SEC, for those that don't know, is the Securities and Exchange Commission.
The people that you don't really ever want to have to talk to.
Yeah, those aren't people you are necessarily friendly with. So those are the IRS people, right? So, so the SEC, they're in charge of policing securities, stocks, bonds. I mean, that's what the SEC does. They oversee Wall Street, all of those. Anything financial and having to do with securities. So state level, each state has one. In Ohio, it's called the Division of Securities. So the Division of Securities back in 1999, once they were contacted by a stockbroker locally who had lost a client to my father, they paid a knock on the door. I'll do the old knock because it's not come through on the audio here. But and so they said, look, they issued a cease and desist, and for what most people don't know, and probably for really good reason. A cease and desist is intended really for one purpose, and that's to scare you. It says basically, look, stop what you're doing. We don't know what you're doing. I'm not saying you're in trouble or you're wrong. I'm now the Division of Securities, but we need you to stop till we get our arms around it.
Yeah, we got some questions.
We got some questions. Now, it's intended to scare you. It's going to scare you. I don't care who you are. Because
they scare everybody.
They scare everybody, and they probably should.
It's what they're meant to do. In
business, and I've said this many times, there are certain things in business that you need to get in front of and or become comfortable with if you want to be successful. Yeah. Litigation is one of them. I say that fairly often. I learned that from LeGrand. Litigation is a tool in business. It's a blood sport, man. You want to get into business, you better be tough. That's right. Because there's things that will come at you, and litigation is kind of part of it. Well, cease and desist, kind of part of that process. We have sent cease and desist from our attorney before. They don't have to be only issued by government entities. Anybody can ask for a cease and desist, and just those words can be enough to scare people. So anyway, cease and desist was issued to my father, and he ultimately basically stopped everything when it came to private money and borrowing. And over the better part of 6 months, and I remember they spent a lot of money at that time on lawyers, all those things, came back and said, look, good old boy, did nothing. Let me say it differently. We're not going to penalize you. There's no fines, fees, anything like that. They gave him a slap on the wrist, which was, you didn't know before. Now you know, so you need to change your policies. And they're very simple, by the way. There were two things that came out of that. One was, look, if you're going to say I'm borrowing 70% of a loan to value on a property, it's got to be 70%. I mean, we would just, so if let's just use easy math, we'd have a $100,000 house, we need to borrow 70 on it. If somebody showed up with, 150, we would take it and we would allocate 70. But again, right there, it's unsecured, right? So right there's breaking what is the law.
You're just getting outside of the purview.
We're just outside of it, right? And again, it was somebody that wanted to come here. Somebody wanted to give the money. Somebody knew whether they were accredited or not, another story. But again, saying no to that and it doesn't make it right at the end of the day, knowing what we knew at that point. So what they said is 70% loan to value. And again, it's one investor, one house, one mortgage. Pair them together, right? It's that simple. If you do those things, you are exempt. You don't have to be an agent. You don't have to be licensed. If you don't do those things, guess what? You need to have a license. You need to register those with the state. There has to be some oversight. Well, my father didn't fit as a registered agent, and if he was in compliance and did these things, he wouldn't have to register or be licensed. And
being a registered agent, that's a whole different pathway. That's red tape galore.
And by the way,
changes the game.
It
at every level of what you do.
If you're a registered, if you're licensed to sell securities, you're in that world. It's not you're not in real estate. You're in the securities world.
Right.
So
it's a whole different
ball game. So and I don't know. There's probably people out there, but I don't know of any licensed securities real estate agent or real estate investor.
No,
they're just two different worlds.
Yeah,
they're two different worlds. So he was not.
People run from that world to come to the real estate investing world because it's a better environment.
There's actually a lot of merit to that. There's a lot of merit to that. So at the end of the day. 6 weeks goes by. So 6-month investigation, no fees, fines, nothing, not even a slap on the wrist other than say, hey, look, you didn't know any better. Now you know. So do it this way going forward. And you should be okay. You'll be exempt from having to deal with us. Well, as I'm told from my dad's attorney, who still is my attorney in some way today up in Ohio, said, 6 weeks later, they went right back to the way they were. And again, I need to stress here, maybe in my dad's defense, it wasn't malicious. They weren't trying to, it was the furthest thing from anything malicious or intentionally trying to wrong somebody. In fact, it was the opposite. But you had, I'll give you a classic example, and I said no names, but I got to tell the story. So the Christmas party, every year, I was, by the way, the young punk son trying to pay people off and change policies. And if we didn't need your money, I wouldn't take it back. So
and they all hated
They hated me because they were used to just showing up with, we'd have people show up with 10 grand or 5 grand, what are you going to do with that? But we would take it, or my dad would take it and start paying high interest on it. It's like, why would we do that? If we don't need it, why would we do that? That doesn't make any...
And your dad's great. He's a people pleaser at heart.
Big time.
He loves to do right by the local people, especially.
He does, and he also, if he was admitting, and I hope people are getting some good takeaways here, but he was always had a fear, was totally unfounded, that if he paid them back, they would take their money somewhere else.
Right.
And
you could see the psychology behind that, though.
You could see it. It was operating from a place of fear. And weakness, if I'm being honest, or maybe candid, but I could. You're right. I could see where that fear ultimately would be. But there's a guy named Ray. Won't use last names, but the guy had the worst breath I've ever smelled in my life. And he'd pull me close and
worse than Andrews.
Worse than listen, Andrews smells like a piece of gum compared to this guy. So, but he would pull me aside and he'd say, "Son, I was there when your father didn't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of. Who are you going to tell me that you're going to pay me off and I'll not take my money back?"
He's one of those guys.
So Mr. Ray, sir, all due respect, we wouldn't be a business very long if we took 15% money that we had to pay out every month that we didn't need.
Yeah,
he
that's
didn't
simple logic.
Well, to me and you, but not to Ray. So, unfortunately, guys like Ray, we did pay off. In fact, in the short time I was president, which was less than 3 years, we paid off like $2.5 million or some number in debt that really was unsecured at its core, in an attempt to try to get clean things up. So anyway, remember, 1999, cease and desist from the Division of Securities, the state level SEC. 6 months of investigation, no real improprieties, which again, they were doing things the wrong way. They were corrected, no fines, and said, look, do it this way going forward. So, or so I think, right? Did we dodge a bullet? Maybe. Well, at the end of the day, I wasn't even there, by the way. I was still in college. So when this whole thing with Tom happened, this was going to be in 2003, 2004. I think it was probably mid-04, somewhere in that range. The Division of Security shows up at our door. I'll never forget. This was in June, late June because I went on my honeymoon. I got married that June. Literally got married June 4th, and we about 2 weeks later I'm back. And at the time we had a big we bought a nursing home that had gone out of business, and it was a great big building. It was pretty awesome, and so I'm in like a back room on a phone call with my attorney. It was private, so I took it in a back room. Plus we had all this space, so I took it in a private room.
Might as well make use of it.
Yeah, might as well, right? So and just in this big old conference room, but and I never forget the Christina, our receptionist, came back. I'll never forget the look on her face. Never. I mean, I could describe it to a T right now. You can just tell when someone's got something on their face, right? And usually not food left over, but when she said, "Scott, there's somebody from the Division of Securities here to see you."
That'll take the oxygen out of a room.
Yeah, that was a short phone call on the other end. Let me call you back. So, and I'm smiling and making light, but I mean, to be candid, the pit in my stomach just came back, just that feeling. So, and it's even if it's like when you get pulled over by a cop.
Yeah, that small suffocating feeling. You're just like
even if you're not speeding, even if you're doing nothing wrong, you're like, I'm going to jail. Like what? I mean, it's like what
whether you're doing wrong or not, you're like, why? What's going on?
Seriously, you get there, like the principal calls you and you're like heart's beating and everything.
Toasted.
Yeah, right. So it's like that same feeling, and I'll never forget the guy's name, and I will share some and not others, but. His was Bobby Lang, and of course Bobby, because we're chums, right? The real good buddies, me and Bobby. But his name was Robert Lang, and called me Bobby, and was a nice guy, and even to the day this thing concluded was a nice guy. So I want to be fair about that. But they also befriend you, and then you let your guard down. Not that we had anything to hide, because we didn't. And I mean, we just told them everything. Sure. And so at the end of the day, that was what it was. But so they come in, and there were three of them, and they say, well, John, my father, we see that we had visited you back in 1999 and had issued a cease and desist, and then you agreed or entered into what's called a consent decree. Consent decree means, okay, I agree, or this is what I'm agreeing to going forward, more importantly. And they kind of went through and said, well, John, have you abided by I'll paraphrase, Danny, have you been perfect with the consent decree? Right. It's not what they said, but I'm paraphrasing. Right. And when the answer was no, that was the beginning of the end. Didn't know it, didn't see it. I had no clue. I was 26 at this time. And I guess I turned 27 in late September, somewhere in that range. It doesn't really matter. But so when you have like the next 30 years of your life planned out, when you grow up and your dad's your hero and this is his business that you had been planning on taking over, you've been 14 years old now, the last 12 years of my life, this has been, and then the next 30 years mapped out. Of course, you would never assume, I mean, how in the world were we doing anything illegal? Right. We weren't perfect and still are not perfect. I know, hard to believe, but flawed, and kidding aside, I say often very flawed man. I'm never bashful about that. But at the end of the day, never in my wildest nightmares. And so when people say, hey, just imagine the worst case scenario, it's like, no, I'm not doing that game, man. I don't imagine worst case, because things got worse than I could have ever imagined, right? So I really don't do the worst case scenario stuff, because you don't always know what it means. So anyway, so at that point, this was June of 2005. Again, that was the writing on the wall. So I mean, we cleared calendars that day. Attorney came over. It was an affair, to say the least. And so over the next really 6 months, there were a lot of back and forth. I'm trying to think if I left anything out. I don't know that I did. I mean, there were obviously a lot of nuances, a lot of moving parts here. And so sometimes when I tell the story, I'll say, oh, darn, I forgot to say that, or this part was really important. I think I've laid out most of the important points. But over the next 6 months, we had a lot of exchange back and forth, obviously providing them information. And I think we made 2 trips down there. But I'll never forget, this would have been right before Thanksgiving. In November in 2005, and we went down there, and they had known everything because we provided all of our financials, and so we get down there, and it's myself, my father, and our attorney, and they come into the room, and they have kind of a nice big table, similar to this, I guess, and there were 3 of them on the other side, and they sat down and said, okay, we've reviewed everything, and we want you to come up with $7 million by next Thursday. Otherwise, we are going to ask you to sign the company over to a receivership. So, first of all, they knew we didn't have $7 million. Number one, that's a lot of money. Number two, we were a real estate investment company. And as I said early on in this podcast, deal makers don't have cash laying
Yeah,
around.
it's
It's
all
on
out.
it's on the street, right? So when you're in real estate, if you got a bunch of money in your account, you're doing something wrong.
You
That
don't know
should
how
be
to
on the street.
negotiate.
Yeah, right. You might be making a bunch of money, but you
Yeah.
better be reinvesting that and
Yeah.
making deals. That's what deal makers do. So plus that's a huge number. And for where we were, even the amount of business we did, that was a high number to come up with in cash. And they knew that. So they were basically setting us up for, it was an easy option.
Forced into receivership.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We didn't really have an option.
Right.
So, and for those that don't know what receivership is, it's simply a law firm in almost every case that is paid to liquidate a business. That's it.
Fire
so,
sale.
Yeah, fire sale. So, and of course that's what happened. And I will say that the receivership, we ended up, one of the receivers, I will say, what became friendly only because he was a young man with a young family, and my dad had been in business for over 20 years, and I had been there in a leadership capacity for less than 2.5 at this time. And so he actually went to bat for me and said, look, he had limited role. I'll leave it there. But I will say that I also say that over the course of the next 3 or 4 years, I'm not sure it was even that long. Yeah, probably somewhere maybe the next 2 to 3 years, they being the receivers, had billed over $3 million in legal fees. So again, let's not forget where we're talking about. Toledo, Ohio here,
Man.
Small town. That's a lot of money
That's
for a law firm. Furthermore, and look, I understand they were just doing what they were paid to do. They didn't come in and ask for the job, right?
Right.
And so they're going to get paid for their time. But when you're talking about investors that were losing money, or ultimately could lose money, to have $3 million go to a law firm to just fire sale stuff, it didn't. Again, I don't know what the option or alternative would be, but it's just never made sense to me. Another story, another day. But that's just a fact that they had over $3 million in billable hours and fees.
I mean, it just creates so many hurt people as opposed to maybe what it could have been, you know?
Yeah, and again, I don't know what the other option would have been. I just know that it was a lose-lose. In fact, I'll never forget, we're sitting at the table. This is back in Columbus, and again, myself, our attorney, and my father, and then across from Bobby Lang and his two people. And when the writing was on the wall, what that means, when we knew that there wasn't an option of $7 million next week, it was forced into receivership. I remember at some point, now I'm 26, a lot more testosterone than I have today, almost 20 years ago, and I remember slamming my fist on the table, broke my watch, saying that this is going to be an absolute bloodbath. Everybody loses in this scenario.
You're just going to destroy all these investors, all their money.
Well, not only the
families.
investors, which were the primary focus and primary concern, but what about the staff that was employed, and what about the 150 people every year? We
That's
had
what I'm saying, the
600,
families
the families in these houses, and I'll get to a story here in just a second. But one of them, they used some of the legal powers. Not eminent. I always use eminent domain as an analogy. It wasn't eminent domain. Eminent domain, for those that don't know, is government authority that says, look, we're gonna take your land, and we're going to pay you for it, but we need to run an expressway through here, or we think something for the better good of society, and therefore we have eminent domain capabilities or power. And so it wasn't that, but they were able to actually nullify performing contracts. So if we had a buyer in a house that was buying it, put money down, doing everything they were supposed to get their loan within the period of time that we've given them, even if they were performing and it was still a valid, legally binding contract, they actually had the ability in some cases that I'm aware of to nullify those and actually terminate them and kick the people out, which was crazy. Now, maybe there's more to the story. I don't know. Did they pay them? I wasn't part of that, but I do know that they nullified a lot of really, really good contracts in the process of the fire sale. So long story. So I pound my fist on the table. I said, it's going to be a bloodbath. I even offered to work free. I said, nobody knows the business better than myself.
Right.
Investors and stuff. There was actually 2 other people that worked with investors than me. Let's not forget, I'm a 26-year-old, quote unquote, young punk son paying all the investors back, or at least trying to. So I wasn't necessarily currying favor in that circle. That had nothing to do with anything, but I didn't really work with them. It was my father. Then we had my predecessor. And then we had another gentleman named Roger, who also, his whole job was investor relations. Roger was in his 60s, kind of gray hair, the Q-tip, and got along with the other Q-tips. And so they were keeping me out of the fray, but that didn't matter in the end because of my title. And I'll share that in just a second. But I offered to liquidate the company for free, let me just kind of get in there. And I think in hindsight, it was obviously never going to be the case because my last name was the same as my father's. And we also can't forget, it's right around the time that obviously the market crashed. Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, Bernie Madoff. There was a whole atmosphere, and of course it got more prevalent in 2008 and then after 2008, that it was just a very, making money at that point was really not a positive.
The whole financial sector was evil.
It was evil, right?
And it was looked upon that way all across the country.
Exactly, and you're scamming or whatever the case is if you're making money, and that might be a little drastic, but
lying, cheating, and stealing to get it is what the layperson thought.
That's it, and it's interesting. I'll stay on point here, but I read an article similar just recently about some other things, and certainly the market conditions that we're dealing with right now. But at that time, again, they wouldn't let me. So they were going to liquidate it one way or another and ultimately fire sale it. But I was president of my dad's company. And in 2002, Enron, for those that may remember Enron was a huge, I think, gas oil company out of Houston or Dallas, somewhere in Texas. And maybe the energy company overall. Doesn't really matter, but they had a big shakeup, and it was a lot of people went to prison, and it was very ugly. A lot of people lost money. They passed some laws after that. This was Sarbanes-Oxley. I'm giving people a law degree here, a law lesson. So in 0203, somewhere there, the Sarbanes-Oxley had passed, and what Sarbanes-Oxley did, amongst many other things, was said, if you're an officer of a company, you have a fiduciary to your shareholders or clients. And one of the biggest things I'll never forget, ignorance of the law is not an excuse, right? Yeah, it's not a good defense.
It's not a good defense.
If you don't know, that's your fault, right? And so, unfortunately, because I was president at 26 years old, and even though I didn't know anything about Sarbanes-Oxley, nor about secured, unsecured, and accredited and non-accredited. I mean, I had some ideas, but I wasn't out hitting the streets raising money. That was not my job. It didn't matter. Like The Rock says, it doesn't matter because I was scooped in by virtue of my title. And so, anyway, fast forward the tape. Over the next several months and years, it just was a bloodbath. In fact, one deal sticks out, 1660 Wildwood. It was a house that I had a lot to do with, and we had a performing buyer in there, meaning we had somebody buying the house on a land contract for $130,000. And the auctioneer, so what the receivers did, the law firm that was liquidating the company, they hired a bunch of auctioneers to auction the properties off. And so we were so close with the auctioneers because it's a small town. We bought so many houses from them that they would call me after these auctions and say, Scotty, you're never going to believe this, man. This house on Wildwood, you had a $130,000 contract on it for someone buying it. We sold it for $19,000 or $18,000 or some number. So that's one microcosm or one example of 632 properties. So not all of them were fire sold, but many of them were. And by the way, now let's just look at the snapshot in time. You're in a declining market, getting ready for the worst crash since the Depression. We're fire selling properties in a small town with limited pool of buyers, nullifying valid contracts, or people actually paying on time and trying to get their loan to buy the property from you. All of that was by the wayside. And again, when you're fire selling that many properties, you don't have that many buyers. And look, there were definitely discrepancies in Dad's company. There were accounting problems. They were sloppy. They were cavalier. There was many times, I've never once defended it. I've always said, look, there were things that should have been done differently, and that's the truth. That's the truth. So there's never, and I hope no one takes anything different from this podcast, but it was never malice, and it was never anything that was designed to hurt people. I mean, I think that should be a given, although maybe people think differently. You never necessarily know what to believe when you read something in the press. But
yeah, I mean, to me, when you pull back and look at it simply and you don't look at it through the red tape of securities divisions or any of that, you got investors who are making great money, who have great relationships with a local guy. You're creating homeowners all across Toledo. You're improving neighborhoods by building up better everything. The reason people get into real estate, you were hitting on almost all 8 cylinders. Technicalities is what kind of ruins the ship. Yeah,
and again, there were a lot of things that it was a great company. I really would say that today. They weren't perfect. There were. I remember there were some jobs where they didn't do as good of rehab, and there were other. Look, we could always find flaws, but no one's sitting over here saying that was a perfect company. But it wasn't to the point. What happened? There were some technicalities that ultimately derailed it, and so. But then you exacerbate it by having fire sales and things like that, and it just was ultimately really a bloodbath at the end of the day. So, unfortunately, there were a lot of losses, and unfortunately, it really shifted kind of the course of my life once again. My dad read a book; it shifted my life, and here again, kind of something that might have been indirect to me or indirect that I did or was involved in that kind of shifted the course of my life as well. So. Yeah. Ultimately, in the end, the company was liquidated, and a couple years after that, I had a family friend who was our attorney. I had gone to school with his kid since I was in second grade, and he's a wonderful attorney, a family friend to this day, was an absolute saint to my mother and my wife, who went through some very difficult times. And so I had spoken with him, and I had thought I was doing my wife a favor. So anybody married out there, and Danny just got married, see that ring showing off. I always say that if you think you're doing a solid by your wife, or maybe a service, by shielding her from some of the torpedoes that you may encounter in life, ultimately that is a mistake. And I thought I was doing my wife, Danny, I had at this time, this is 2006 now, maybe 2007, in that range. I had a young daughter that was born in 2006, had to think about that twice, 2006, and she was such a blessing in such a dark time. It couldn't have been more timely, her birth. It saved a lot, certainly. But in this window of time, a young daughter, and here all these things are happening, it's kind of thinking, is this really happening to me? And it's, if you're in a situation, and I know it happens to people every day all over the world, where you can't really even fathom that this is happening to your life. It all of a sudden, kind of like in the snap of a finger, takes this 90-degree turn. And so, of course, now I have a wife and a daughter, and as a man, and I'm staring at the ceiling, who's going to protect them? Who's going to watch over? I mean, I can't even tell you the feeling as a new husband and a new father, what that felt like. So the uncertainty was certainly unsettling, to say the least. But so I didn't want to share that with my wife. It was hard enough that I had to deal with it. I didn't want her staring at the ceiling with me. Right. Just felt that I could kind of shoulder the load. And so, and this is the part that I was hoping it wasn't going to happen, but it's already happened. And so, because I don't try not to get emotional, but unfortunately we get to this part of the story and it usually catches me. But so it's a Friday, and we're going to see my attorney. And so,
that's a bad day.
Yeah, it was not a good day. So I apologize. I don't mean to get here all of a sudden. In fact, I was having fun until this point. So we go down to see my attorney. It's my mom and my wife and I. And my dad couldn't come because at this point he was what would be considered a co-defendant.
Yeah, at that point you guys are kind of...
now nothing was formal yet, but meaning that there was no formal charges, but it was to the point where Dad was not a part of that meeting. Yeah. So my wife and my mom kind of had an idea. But I think that when you're dealing with something that you don't want to deal with, your mind will do things to shield you from that. Mm-hmm. And so even though they probably had an idea, they didn't. So we go downtown and we sit down. Again, this is a family friend that has known me for, at this point, probably 15 years. I met him when I was in 5 years old, something like that. So I'm 27, 28 at this point. So more than that, 20 years plus. And so my mom and wife and I sit down, and he came right out, and we didn't really do pleasantries. And he said, "I've got some bad news." He said, "They want to indict you." And this part always catches me, but I'm prepared to work through it here. But what catches me the most is the look on my mom's face. Yeah. And my wife too. But as a parent now, to know that your kid might have to go through that was not easy. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that was not a fun day.
It's terrible.
It wasn't a fun meeting, and it wasn't a fun car ride home, I'm sure. So I think they made me sit in the way back. No, just kidding. So
they probably did.
I did. I will make a confession here on the podcast, change the tenor a bit. I was a kid, got caught stealing cigarettes. I don't even know how old I was. Probably, who knows? That kid, not even 10 years old. And Dad had to come pick me up, and he said, "Get your ass in the back. You're sitting." I literally made me. I didn't want to see it.
I don't even want to look at you.
We had a station wagon. I had to sit in the way back and lay down so he couldn't see me.
Looking out the back of the station
That's
wagon.
it. That's exactly.
I didn't want to
it.
see your face.
That's exactly it. He was not happy with me that day, so it wasn't quite that bad on the way home. But again, it was devastating. I don't know how else to say it. I don't know how else to say it. Your life is crushed in a moment. Many people have experienced something similar, maybe not prison, but where one statement, one piece of advice, one occurrence changes everything in your life. And that's heavy, man. And I don't know how you reconcile it. I don't know how you work through it in your mind, other than everything flashes before you. You have all these bad thoughts. And so, long story, it was a tough day, and certainly was just the beginning. And again, super sidebar, but nobody, God doesn't allow people to see what is in front of them in their life, because there are so many good and so many things that may not be good that people couldn't handle them. It's one of those examples where, I'm glad I didn't know what was in front of me, because it got worse and worse. And so ultimately, we had ups and downs, but what's really crazy about the justice system is, if they want you, they make it so bad for you if you don't do what they want, that it's just not and I'm not here to talk about that. It's not my cross to bear or axe to grind, but it's a flawed system. It's a flawed system. And so, and by the way, this Tom fella that was never the problem. He's not the reason that the company went under, but his spotlight shown over on us, if that makes sense. So this guy that borrowed the workman's comp money and lent it to my dad, had that never happened, we probably wouldn't have this podcast. But then I wouldn't have gotten to meet you, Danny, and you, Andrew, and so
the path would have been very different.
Well, and I joke, of course, in the midst of a little bit of an emotion, that it did change the path of my life, and of course, I wouldn't be doing this had I remained there. But ultimately, that kind of sequence of events that led up to everything, ultimately, led to me being here, and kind of the downfall, if you will. But Tom, the guy that borrowed the money, fought what they proposed him. So the prosecutors offered him something, and he said, look, whatever he said, I wasn't there. All I know is he fought it. And because he fought it, he got an 18-year prison term.
So they threw the book at him.
They threw the book at him. So if you cooperate with them, they will usually work with you. Right. If you don't, then they go out of their way to make you an example. And it's the way the system is. It's a loaded system. So ultimately, at 26, 27, 28 years old at this point, young wife, young kid, and so let me kind of finish the story, at least this part of it. So that Friday, went home. I remember going for a jog that Friday afternoon, where my attorney kind of dropped the bomb on my wife. He didn't drop the bomb. He shared it with my wife and my mother and I. I'd kind of known. I knew they didn't. And it was a very tough day. And I went for a jog that day, and I got some clarity, or so I thought. I remember calling him and my attorney, and I said, Mr. Conup, I appreciate what you said, but I have no interest in taking some sort of a deal. How could I ever look my daughter in the face? I just have a newborn. How could I? She's old enough to say, I did these things. I'm guilty of these things. And so I said, thanks, but no thanks. Well, we had agreed that we're going to go back down there the following Friday, and of what I had hoped maybe would be a more pleasant. I didn't hope that. I knew it was not a pleasant time of my life, but we get back down there, and he said, Scott, I've known you for a long time now. He said, you have a young wife and a young daughter. He said, what they're offering you is this, and if you don't take it, and I think you have a case, but he said they'll throw the book at you if you lose. And he said, don't forget, your last name is the same as your dad's. Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, Bernie Madoff, the market, at this point, it was right around 2008, right around the crash. It was right in that window of time. Yeah. And he said, and if you lose, it's really bad. And what I haven't shared is that it cost me $25,000 just to retain them. Now, I had money at the time, but our company went out of business. So you only have so much saved up, and I thought I did a good job of that. But $25,000 was a chunk. I had a wife, kid, and I didn't even, I've left out some parts that are probably not important. We took the skeleton company of the company, the skeleton team. We didn't even miss a day. We literally, when I found out the writing was on the wall, I went and raised $2.1 million, went to our top 2 investors and said, look, here's what's happening. Here's what I'm going to do. Do you guys want to be a part of it? And they did. We started a new company. I took the top people from our company, Skeleton, and we went out and didn't miss a beat and did a bunch of really great business and actually made some pretty good money. So that was great. But at the end of the day, $25,000 was a ton of money. And so he said, Scott, if you want to go to trial, it's another $25,000, and you probably wouldn't go to trial for another 18 months. Well, I'm a forward motion guy, and the company goes out of business in 2005. We start right back up. This at 2007, 2008 right now, kind of in limbo at this point. There was enough going on, and there were some other things with family that caused some issues I won't get into. But ultimately, $25,000 and waiting another year and a half was just not attractive.
No.
So he said, so my advice is that you take the deal. And again, I usually get emotional at this point. I think I've gotten out of my system, but it was one of those hard pills to swallow. But in the end, his advice to me was to take the deal, which I did. So ultimately, I did go to prison. Again, I still have a tough time even saying that. I usually call it my time away. But I will kind of shift. And as we kind of get ready to draw this to a close, I'll just share a couple things. And, kind of went into it. And I'll never forget the very first night. And I remember looking around saying, there's just no way this is happening to me. Number one, but I guess there is, because here I am.
Not believing the circumstances at all.
And it was, I remember there's some other things. I had 2 jackets on, 2 sweatshirts, 2 pairs of pants, and gloves, and was in bed still seeing my breath, because they didn't believe in heat at that time, I guess. But anyway, so there was a lot of stories in there, most of them good, fortunately. I had some experiences there that'll serve me well the rest of my life. And just like anything, it was kind of like, well, God, I don't like it. But I just, Danny, I couldn't believe, and to this day I know better, that I was there just to suffer or be punished or whatever you want to call it. And I will also say, for the record, I've always been a humble guy, and from firsthand, very, very humble. Very. Part of that, if I guess in being, I say it the way it is. You want to talk about being humbled? I was humbled.
Nothing will quite do it like that.
Nothing will do it like that. So for the rest of my life, God is my witness, and people that know me know that already, that humility is a core component of who I am, because I've been humbled, and I don't want to be humbled again. And that's about as humble as you can get. So, but I realized that it's up to me at this point to make the most of it, and so I did. In fact, I taught classes, I tutored, I read 2 books a week. My aunt would send them to me. So it was couldn't imagine worse. There were some horrible experiences. Again, nothing physical with me, and thank God, but it was mental, and with a young child and visits, and it just was really, really a tough time. But it shaped the course of my life, and I will say something that's profound. Never have I been so thankful and grateful. I told this to you the other day.
Yeah, we talk about that every now and then. It blows my mind.
When I was at the very bottom, I was so thankful for what I had. I'm around the worst of the worst. This was a state penitentiary. This wasn't some, Club Fed or whatever they call that. Yeah. And yet I was so thankful because I saw what I had, and it's still profound to me to this day because I have so much now, and I try to be as thankful as I was when I was at the very bottom, but I feel like I was the most thankful there. So, but at the end of the day, I'm going to conclude with this, as I do in our trainings, because I think that hopefully the story connected. I'd love to think and hope that maybe it inspired. I don't know what it would inspire, but if people are going through a tough time, there's tough times never last. Tough people always do. It gets better. There's no question. And there are times I wondered. There were times I didn't think it could get worse. Kept getting worse, but ultimately it got better. And I think if there's one big takeaway, it's that no matter what someone's going through right now, and no matter what you're going through, it's not forever. It will get better, and you got to believe, and sometimes you got to just surrender and just say, God, I don't know why this is happening. I don't like it. What are you trying to teach me, number one?
Where's the silver lining?
Yeah, and that's number 2. I've always believed that in every adversity there's a lesson, there's a takeaway, there's something that you're supposed to learn or be taught or be a part of for some experience greater than you. The second part of that is that if you go in looking for it, there's always a silver lining. Napoleon Hill, in every adversity, there's a seed, an equal or greater seed of benefit, of positive that comes from it.
That's right.
Look for the silver linings up front. When you look for the silver linings and you look for the lessons, sometimes it can make that hardship, that challenging time a little bit easier, a little bit smoother. And again, when you kind of look at things spiritually and say, boy, it doesn't make sense in the real world. It doesn't make sense here. If there were 10
the
of
math does not add up here.
No, if there were 10 to me and 10 of my buddies or 9 of my buddies and my, let's just say, colleagues and co-workers and peers, I'd have been the 10th guy you'd have picked that would have ended up in prison. Yeah. And again, it just didn't make sense. And I will say, when we're sitting at that table with Bobby Lang in the Division of Securities, and I just said to him, Mr. Lang, what should I have done differently? Not my dad, but what should I have done differently to not be here? And his answer blew me away with ignorance, although that's probably not fair, but he said, Scott, the minute you found out that your dad hadn't secured all the investments, you should have quit. I said, yeah, but it was my dad.
Right.
Like, it's my family. It's my dad. Like, we mean quit.
It's like the most heartless comment back.
And it just was ill. It was ill-informed, or it was
Yeah.
just not a wise statement. I mean, it just didn't make any sense. And so, but again, here I am, and looking up at the ceiling, you know, in a state penitentiary with all these other people that were less than savory, and was that politically correct? Yes,
Less than savory.
So
yeah,
I was trying to be PC.
We're not getting
there.
canceled.
So yeah, I don't want this to be too woke. But anyway, but at the end of the day, that's when I realized that God had a greater purpose for this pain. And if anyone listening is going through something, I would encourage them to look at it from maybe the lens of spirituality. I don't care what your faith is. If I hope you believe in God, I will say that. But it doesn't matter. I'm a spiritual guy. When you look at things from a different vantage point, okay, how can other people benefit from my pain, my hardship? What lesson you try and teach me? And I know there's good that's going to come from it. You look for those things early on. It's going to help you get through whatever it is you're going through. So I love real estate that much. Yes, I went to prison for it. That's my story. Only shed one tear. It wasn't too bad. But to be candid, I'm thankful for the hard times. Never thought I'd say that, but it's not cliche to say it was probably one of the best things that happened in my life. I don't want to go through it again, and I don't want anyone else to have to go through it because it was not fun. But it shifted and directed my life to where I am today, and I'll leave it there.
It's allowing you to affect a lot of other people's lives.
I hope so.
Which is really important. I'll speak from first-person experience. I came here almost 7 years ago. Didn't know your story when I got here. Looking for a second opportunity. I lost a family business. Yep. Ends up we connected. I've been through a lot of somehow had the same childhood.
I know, 12 years older than you.
12 years older than me.
We grew up together. We had 12 years older than you. I don't know how that is, but
but we've been through a lot of the same type of experiences. And the first time I heard your story, it connected with me in a big way because you're just giving direction back to people. You know, you go all the way to the bottom, you climb all the way back to the top, and you just put your head down and go through whatever the adversity is. I came here with little direction. I didn't know what was going on in my life. I just lost a whole chapter of my life.
Yeah.
It opened a new one. And I thank you for that. You opened a new one. It was amazing.
It's a great tie-down, by the way, because that really did happen in your life. You had to close some doors.
Big time.
Yeah, and you probably didn't know the doors were going to open.
I had no clue.
Yeah.
You know, and then a guy walks into your life. He's got this great direction. It comes from a powerful story. So, you know, hopefully through this podcast, we can touch thousands, tens of thousands of people with that same exact point.
I hope so.
With that, let's wrap up episode number 1. We did it. 3 years in the making. We made it. We made it. Andrew, thanks, buddy.
Yeah,
this was awesome.
Talk about what else you expect to be talking about in future episodes.
All right, so some future episodes.
We're definitely not gonna drag the emotions down to right. Like this is not gonna be a crime or a poke at the law type of podcast here. But no. So what we plan to talk about and grill every facet of real estate investing. Real estate investing is kind of what drove through that whole story. He didn't run away from it. I've run to it. It's a beautiful vehicle to change your life. If you're looking to make a change and you need a vehicle to get there, I think investing in real estate is that vehicle. We're not just this is not an educational podcast. We're not just going to teach you theories. We're going to talk about our real experiences, active market experiences. We're going to have great co-hosts on here. We're going to have great people that we interview on here, share everything that our company's doing, the lives that we're touching, buyer successes, seller successes, other investment strategies. I like, with all due respect, we're going to poke some holes in some things that other people do, probably get into some heated discussions now and then and have some great debate. But I think it's going to be an amazing platform to hopefully draw people to the vehicle that we love that's helped progress our lives so much.
Yeah, that's it. And I would just dovetail that. I think we want to make it entertaining, but we also really want to have a very valuable podcast. We want to make sure, we think that if we can share a lot of really good knowledge, that there will be people that take it and do with it, and those that will want to end up working with us in some way. So we want this to be informative. We want it to be entertaining. We kind of make fun of each other, and we like to make fun of ourselves, and so we'll have some fun with it. But I'd like to say that as we go forward, there's going to be some really, really good content. We got another partner that's a great host, Michael, who will be on here next time.
Wait till you guys get to meet Michael Matthew. Coming in hot.
Yeah, he'll be coming in hot, and we'll have we've got an amazing guest list already put together. So this is the first of many, and I guess I will say that I hope everybody enjoys, and a lot more to come, a lot of really good stuff to come as well. So All right. Well, Danny, thank you. Andrew,
was it.
Thank you,
We made
guys.
it.
We made it. All right. We'll see y'all next time.
See you later, everybody.